Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. Our cover story tonight comes from Pakistan. It is a story of terror. The country has had a bloody start to the year. There have been 58 attacks in 28 days. That's over 2 terror attacks every day. Pakistan's terror monsters have come back to haunt the country. And you know why this is especially bad news for the country? Because it is already dealing with the terror of economic misery, which is only mounting. The common man is suffering. Inflation in the country has now reached near a 50-year high. We tell you how things reached this point. Also on the show for you tonight, the factory of the world might not have enough resources when it comes to artificial intelligence. We tell you how China is hunting for AI talent overseas. The G20 meeting sees no joint communique. We tell you why there was lack of consensus on the Russia-Ukraine war. How does the Adani saga affect you? What does it mean for you and me? We tell you. Just how deadly are artificial sweeteners? A new study links them to heart disease. We tell you all about it. If you have heard it once, you have heard it 100 times. Pakistan has become a terror state. And why is that? Because its governments, all of them, have agreed on just one policy, that is how to use their army intelligence agency, ISI, as a mastermind for the export of terror to India through organizations like the Lashkar-e-Toiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed. Moreover, the ISI created the Taliban in bases like Quetta and the Northwest Frontier, and over the last 3 decades, it has managed to seize the government in Kabul twice. Today, Pakistan is in a state of terror. It is being wounded and bled by the very monsters it helped create. Mosques are being attacked. There are random roadside explosions. Terrorists are even barging into police headquarters and showering bullets on the police officers while being dressed as the police themselves. That is the true terrible situation in Pakistan. So what really is happening? Terrorist monsters have now turned their guns upon their mentor. Because terrorists who were trained and funded by the terror state now want to take control of Pakistan, having taken over Afghanistan in the name of extremist faith supremacy. They now want to seize power in Islamabad and turn Pakistan into a full-fledged terror republic. And guess what? Their progress is pretty impressive. In the last month alone, terrorists managed to carry out 58 attacks in Pakistan. That, by the way, is 58 attacks in 28 days. On average, over 2 per day. Imagine that. A minimum of 2 terror attacks every single day. There were 22 attacks in Balochistan, 16 in the federally administered tribal areas, 13 in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, 4 terror attacks in Punjab, 3 in Sindh, with Karachi being hit. Basically, You are never safe in Pakistan. Terror can strike you just about anywhere and at any time. Some of these attacks make it to the headlines, like the suicide blast in Peshawar Mosque or the Karachi police headquarters attack. The other incidents simply do not. The Pakistani citizen, overwhelmed with the crises, just accepts arbitrary deaths as the new reality and moves on because terror, you see, has become Pakistan's reality. 63 people died in Pakistan in 28 days, courtesy terror attacks. 27 of them were civilians. 134 people were injured, courtesy terror attacks. And what is the government doing about this? Well, no surprises there. It is doing nothing. Not because it wants to do nothing, but because it cannot do anything. Who are behind these attacks? Well, a plethora of terror groups operating on Pakistani soil. The Lashkar-e-Toibas of the world. Continuing story, the new players being the Islamic State Khorasan and the TTP of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. The TTP was once the ISI's blue-eyed boy, as long as it was obedient and killing those on the ISI's instruction list. We have told you about the TTP's origin a couple of times on this very show, and tonight warrants a repeat. You see, it grew alongside the Afghan Taliban between 2001 and 2021. It remained a marginal player as long as the Taliban had not taken Kabul. But now that the Taliban is in power in Afghanistan and can offer a safe sanctuary for its suicide killers, the TTP has launched the offensive to destroy the Pakistan state and take over the ruins and rebuild the quote-unquote Islamic State of its dreams. Today, the TTP is more powerful than it has ever been. The group has claimed large parts of territory in the western frontier regions of Pakistan. It has also announced a parallel government with cabinet ministers. The agency that tabulated the number of attacks, the Pakistan Institute of Conflict and Security Studies, had published a similar report at the end of January. That report said January 2023 was the deadliest month since July 2018. And the agency now says that the number of attacks in February was not just unmatched since 2018, but since 2015. Previously, the TTP's base and area of operations would be more or less concentrated in the provinces like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But that has been changing now. In February, there was actually a decline in terror attacks in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa for good reason. For TTP is already in control of large parts of territory there. The number of attacks went up in Punjab and Sindh. Terror groups are expanding their frontiers. And as for the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, it is reaping what it sowed. And we have been saying this for quite some time now. Terror is just one of Pakistan's many problems. The other is the country's economy. It remains in the doldrums. Let me start with this report. Inflation in Pakistan has jumped to 31.5%. I repeat, 31.5%. That, by the way, is the highest in nearly 50 years, 50. These figures have been released by the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics. It says, not since 1974 has Pakistan seen such a high rate of inflation. The yearly average inflation that year was 32.78%. And this year, that is 2023, it has risen to 31.5%. We know why inflation is soaring right now. It's due to a series of economic problems. The forex reserves are sinking, imports are stuck at the ports, and the national debt is only mounting. But what happened 50 years ago? Why did inflation hit a record high in the year 1974? Well, it doesn't take a genius to understand. Due to the 1971 Indo-Pak War. Not only did it dismember Pakistan, it also ruined the country's economy. You see, East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, accounted for a major chunk of Pakistan's exports, especially jute. And at that time, jute from Bangladesh contributed to half of Pakistan's overall exports. As soon as the war started, these exports came to a standstill. And this crisis drastically aggravated a liquidity crunch. A crunch that turned out to be the most serious one in Pakistan's history. And 5 decades later, Pakistan is facing another liquidity crunch. The numbers are alarming. If I speak of the consumer price index, it has risen 27.55% on a year-on-year basis. The overall prices of essentials rose 4.3% last month. The prices of food and non-alcoholic beverages have risen 45.07%. And the prices of alcoholic beverages and tobacco products have risen 47.59%. And it doesn't even end there. The value of the Pakistani rupee is 278 against the dollar. There are just $3.25 billion left in foreign reserves, and the GDP growth forecast has been trimmed to 4.3% for this year. And if I tell you about the fuel prices, petrol is selling at 272 rupees per litre. Diesel is selling at 262 rupees per litre. Kerosene is selling at 217 rupees per litre. The price of milk has increased from 190 rupees per litre to 235. Just to put this simply, Pakistan is in a state of absolute mess. And reports say it has now become the 17th most expensive country in the world. One that is hurriedly moving towards hyperinflation. Have a look at this report now. Pakistan's central bank has raised its benchmark interest rate to 20%. And why is that? So that it could rein in the soaring inflation. Pakistan owes over $22 billion to foreign lenders. And what's worse, it will have to pay this $22 billion this year itself. And this has raised fears that Pakistan may not be able to repay this amount and eventually default. The impact of these fears is overbearing. Have a look at this headline. Global ratings agency Moody's has cut Pakistan's sovereign credit rating. Earlier, the rating stood at CAA1. It has now been downgraded to CAA3. What explains this? Well, the country's increasingly fragile liquidity. And then we have this report. We told you about this a few days ago. It says Pakistani industries are bracing themselves for cuts in production and the workforce, especially the textile sector. It has reportedly witnessed a 14.8% decline in exports. And the result is this. The Trade Union Federation of Pakistan says that as many as 1 million informal workers may lose their jobs. 1 million. Most of them will be from the textile sector. So the way things stand, inflation is at a record high. Prices of essentials are soaring. Fuel prices are skyrocketing. Interest rates are being spiked. The national debt is mounting. Pakistan's ratings are being slashed, and millions are at risk of losing their jobs. Given the magnitude of these problems, it's safe to say that more than help, Pakistan is in need of prayers. And from Pakistan, we turn to its iron brother, China. It seems to be bolstering its defenses, ramping up its military stockpile, and advancing its technological finesse. 3 recent developments give you an idea. Let me start with this report. It says China has developed a low-cost fiber optic gyroscope that can be mass-produced in an old-fashioned computer chip plant. For the unversed, gyroscope is a critical component of a missile. It adjusts the missile's turn and pitch motion autonomously while in flight, even when its GPS malfunctions. Since World War II, it has been used for automatic steering and to correct turn and pitch motion in the ballistic missiles. So China has developed a low-cost fiber optic version of this, and reports say this could help Beijing in speeding up the delivery of tactical missiles and other guided weapons. The Chinese state media is selling it as a big breakthrough. Why is that? Because so far, only one other country had such technologies, the United States of America. And China has become the second country to possess it. Reports say this will only add to China's missile stockpile, a stockpile that is one of the largest and one of the most diverse in the world. And this development comes at a very interesting time. Tensions between China and America are at an all-time high. And just last month, America shot down a suspected Chinese spy balloon. Could the discovery of this fiber optic gyroscope heighten tensions further? Well, it certainly seems like that. Because this is not the only development to be coming out of China. Here's another one. Researchers in China say their artificial intelligence is the first to simulate an aerial battle. A battle involving hypersonic aircraft flying at 11 times the speed of sound. And this technology has apparently come up with a surprising tactic for defeating the enemy. Let me explain this. In the computer simulation, a hypersonic aircraft spotted an enemy fighter jet flying at Mach 13. The hypersonic plane's pilot was then given an order to kill. In previous simulations, this command would have directed the pilot to head straight towards the target. But in this one, the pilot, guided by an artificial intelligence tool, flew to an unexpected position far ahead of the aircraft and fired a missile over the shoulder, tossing it backwards towards the enemy. The missile hit the enemy fighter, which was 30 kilometers behind, and ended the battle in less than 8 seconds. And according to researchers behind this experiment, this counterintuitive approach has offered the longest possible killing range with the lowest risk to the pilot. They say that this AI-assisted method could greatly improve the performance of Chinese pilots and aircraft. And what does that tell you? That China is increasingly banking on artificial intelligence to improve its prospects on the battlefield. I am not saying this, media reports are. Take this one, for example. It says China's tech firms are chasing overseas AI talent, not just to improve its military capabilities, but also to build chat bots that can rival ChatGPT. That's right. China's tech firms are scrambling to woo AI experts from abroad, especially those at OpenAI, the American startup behind ChatGPT. Now, for the unversed, ChatGPT is capable of generating human-like responses to complex questions. And it has taken the world by storm. We have been telling you about this. Since its launch in late November, spurring a race among tech giants that are rushing to introduce their own versions, ChatGPT has been dominating headlines. And you see, China does not want to be left behind. But the thing is, it doesn't have enough experienced AI experts. There is a huge talent gap within the country. So China is trying to get in talent from abroad. It is trying to recruit foreign experts, poach them from companies in the United States. But why is China so desperate? What exactly is it planning? Is it preparing for something big? And I ask these questions because from inventing fiber optic gyroscopes to simulating hypersonic aerial battles to hunting for foreign AI experts, China seems to be on an overdrive. And this only adds to our doubts and concerns. Let's now tell you about the other big headline of the day. We have been telling you about the G20 foreign ministers meeting in New Delhi, the expectations from the meeting and the key takeaways. The meeting today saw no joint communique. There was no joint statement because of the differences that could not be reconciled. What led to these differences? Why was there lack of consensus over what? Let me just break it down for you. First things first, the Russia-Ukraine war continued to cast its shadow on the meeting. The US and its European allies sparred with Russia over the war in Ukraine. They called on the group of 20 nations to keep up the pressure on Moscow to end the war. And Russia, meanwhile, hit back at the West. Russia blamed the West for the global political and economic crisis and accused the West of trying to shift the blame for their economic failures onto Russia. Consensus was achieved on over 90% of the issues, but no joint communique was released. Listen in.
Of the issues which concern especially the global south, the developing countries, there was a considerable meeting of minds, and a considerable meeting of minds which has been captured by the outcome document.
Meanwhile, Russia and China jointly criticized the West. The Russian foreign minister said the West is now isolating itself.
The West says Russia should face a strategic defeat. This aligns with their central problem with Russia. They attempt to preserve the hegemony on the world arena. The West says Russia should face a strategic defeat. The West attempts to preserve their hegemony on the world arena.
And that although the West represents itself as the beacon of democracy, Russia says it keeps on bullying other regions. And at the same time, the Russian minister said that Moscow respects New Delhi's stance over the Ukraine conflict. Not just that, Russia accused the West of turning work on the G20 agenda into a farce. And the US Secretary of State, Adani, meanwhile, made it clear that this meeting has been marred by Russia's unprovoked and unjustified war against Ukraine. Those were the words used.
And let me begin by thanking our host, India, for setting out an ambitious agenda for this meeting and for its presidency of the G20. Not a single G20 member voted with Russia to oppose that resolution. The chair's statement by India today reaffirmed the declaration issued by the G20 leaders last year in Bali, which, and I quote, strongly condemned the war in Ukraine and stressed it is causing immense human suffering and exacerbating existing fragilities. Every G20 member, and virtually every country, period, continues to bear the costs of Russia's war of aggression, a war that President Putin could end tomorrow if he chose to do so.
China, meanwhile, joined Russia in refusing to support a demand for Moscow to cease the hostilities in Ukraine. The two countries were the only members not to agree to the statement demanding Russia's complete and unconditional withdrawal from the territory of Ukraine. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, also held bilateral discussions with the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. And while responding to a question asked by WION about his meeting with the Chinese foreign minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar said the talks were about the current state of the relationship between the two sides, which the Indian External Affairs Minister himself described as abnormal.
The bulk of our conversation, understandably, was about the current state of our relationship, which many of you have heard me describe as abnormal. And I think those were among the adjectives that I used in that meeting. We have, there are real problems in that relationship that need to be looked at, that need to be discussed very openly and candidly between us. That's what we sought to do today. We also had a brief discussion on what was happening in the G20 framework.
So as it turns out, the Russia-Ukraine war continued to remain in the spotlight as expected. And consensus on the war became a casualty during the meeting today. The Adani Group is in the news again. India's top court has now announced a probe into the matter. There has been a fiasco ever since Hindenburg published its explosive research. The Adani Group's stock plummeted. Gautam Adani was the world's third richest person. Now he is not even among the top 20. But did you wonder, how does this saga really affect you? What does it mean for you and me? What the Supreme Court says, how does this trickle down to your kitchen as an Indian? What if I told you that your whole life savings could be in danger? Answer this. Do you have an LIC insurance? You most probably do. It is India's largest insurer and it suffered a great deal in this entire Adani mess. Our next report telling you more.
Since the republication of the Hindenburg research report, LIC stock have plunged nearly 17%. It had made significant investments in the Adani Group. In Adani Enterprises, it holds 4.2% of the shares. In Adani Ports, it holds 9.1%. In Adani Total Gas, it has a stake of 5.9%. Let's look at some more figures. The report was published on January 24th. LIC held around $9.8 billion worth of Adani stocks. Now its value is down to $3.9 billion. LIC suffered a loss of over $4.8 billion between 24th and 27th January. Its exposure to Adani stocks has now turned negative. At the end of February, its stocks hit a record low of $6.8. Now, all these numbers are fine, but what is the outcome? What does it spell for you and I? The company's stock plummeting is always a worrying sign. LIC is India's largest insurer. More than 250 million investors rely on LIC. Almost every middle-class Indian turns to the company for life insurances, house financing, post-retirement savings. In simple words, they invest their life savings through this corporation. LIC further invests that money into assets such as stocks. The returns from these assets are paid back to investors. You see, an investor's input in LIC's products is linked to the equity market. That's why where LIC invests is crucial for your returns. And it was heavily investing in the Adani Group. So where does the whole fiasco leave you? Is your hard-earned money in danger? It very well could be. LIC's poor investment decisions are not new. The company has long generated poor returns for its investors. The Hindenburg report accuses the Adani Group of fraud and stock manipulation. It reported that the group's 7 listed firms were overvalued by more than 85%. The share price of Adani Total Gas has fallen by 81%, that of Adani Transmission by 74%, Adani Enterprises by nearly 62%, and Adani Ports by more than 26%. If the allegations against the Adani Group are correct, it could leave millions of Indians in a loss and debt. Why? Because of LIC's poor decisions. Park your savings in companies like LIC, and it puts that money at risk.
Are you ready to break up with TikTok? If you are under 18, I have news for you. In the latest instance of tokenism, the social media platform TikTok has announced that it will be setting a 1-hour daily time limit for every user under the age of 18. Once considered as just a dancing app for children, TikTok is now a topic of heated discussions in countries around the world. And note the timing of this time limit. It comes amid calls to ban the application. There have been concerns over national security and data privacy. But social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram are highly likely to send teens down rabbit holes that would negatively impact their mental health. This is what I'm talking about. A report published by the Center for Countering Digital Hate found that it can take less than 3 minutes after signing up on TikTok to be bombarded with content promoting eating disorders or content related to suicide. Less than 3 minutes. So maybe the algorithms should focus more on this instead of coming up with hollow schemes that supposedly limit the screen time. And I say supposedly because this new feature is not foolproof either. When you reach the 60-minute time limit, you will be prompted to enter a passcode, as TikTok claims, requiring you to make an active decision to keep scrolling. For those below 13, parents will be required to enter the passcode to enable 30 minutes of additional watch time. But applications like TikTok do not have an age verification process, and you can simply put a fake birth date when you register. And it just keeps getting worse. You can simply deactivate this feature as well. Upon doing so, you will receive a prompt from TikTok after 100 minutes of usage to set your own screen time controls, which can be dismissed. This feature is the latest in the list of shoddy policies released by social media platforms to save face. Last September, remember, Instagram announced that it would be launching an optional take a break tool. Users can choose when they want to be alerted about their usage. They will then get a full screen alert to close the application and suggest activities like taking a deep breath, listening to a song, or writing something down. But this feature, by the way, works only if you have been scrolling for one continuous session. If you switch apps or if the app closes while you go for a quick bathroom break, the timer resets. As for the prompt to go do some other activities, all you have to do is select the done option at the bottom of the prompt to access the application again. 2 months before that, Meta rolled out new tools for parents to supervise their children's Instagram. But to do so, the user will have to allow their parents to connect and supervise their teenager's account. So basically, these applications have just added some extra steps to keep using the app just the way you were earlier. And think about it. Why would they willingly want you to reduce the app's usage? Every time you like a post, share a reel, or comment on a cute puppy post, it only means good news for these applications. The social media industry, by the way, is worth $231.1 billion. The total revenue generated by Meta, TikTok, YouTube, Snapchat in 2022 amounts to a whopping $213.3 billion. Your screen time is their revenue. TikTok advocating limited screen time is like China promoting free speech or an airlines company protesting against carbon footprint. But while these agendas prevail, let me remind you just how essential it is to actually take a break from your screen. The blue light from the screens, it makes it harder to sleep. The light from the screen and the constant mental activity tricks your brain into thinking that it's time to stay awake. Prolonged exposure to screens increases the stress hormone, cortisol, in our bodies. And therefore, taking time away from your phone might help stabilize your mood and reduce anxiety and increase your attention span as well, patience, impulse controls as well. Addictive screen time use also involves craving behavior, which resembles substance dependence behavior. Many of you might have experienced something similar to this. When you resort to scrolling through social media, as soon as you take a break or subconsciously reach out for your phone, every couple of minutes, reducing your screen time allows your brain to slow down and focus without distractions. And then there is the fact that excessive screen time is associated with risk factors for cardiovascular diseases like high blood pressure, insulin resistance, poor stress regulation. And of course, spending long hours staring at a screen strains the eyes and leaves them feeling fried. But it also leads to retina damage and blurred vision. Don't believe me? Just ask the Singaporeans, who have one of the highest rates of myopia in the world, especially childhood myopia, which is largely attributed to the usage of mobile phones, handheld gaming devices, personal computers, and iPads. To counter these implications, follow the 20-20-20 rule. What's that? Every 20 minutes, take a 20-second break and focus your eyes on something at least 20 feet away. Move, stand up, move around, stretch a bit, pay attention to your posture, try to create tech-free zones in your home. You could also try turning your phone's display grey, because with the colors gone, your phone loses its visual appeal. Remember, the onus of taking care of your health is on you and not anyone else, and especially not a social media giant that profits off the minutes that you spend on it, which further solidifies that features released by these applications are simply PR stunts. Are you a Shakespeare fan? Do you love the timeless tragedy Romeo and Juliet? If you do, then this story will intrigue you. It involves love, murder, and mobsters. You heard that right, mobsters. Daniele Di Giacomo and Jesse Risotto fell in love. But their romance caused turmoil in the Sicilian mafia. It also helped solve a murder mystery. I will get to that later. Let's just talk about these star-crossed lovers first. Pay attention to their last names, Di Giacomo and Risotto. Do they ring a bell? For those unversed, the lovers belong to rival clans in the Sicilian town of Palermo. The families have a dark history. When Risotto relatives found out about the relationship, they were alarmed. They vowed to end it. Italy's military police wiretapped Risotto's one of the family members, was heard saying they must split up. But why? Because of a murder that happened 9 years ago. Let's just rewind a bit. Jesse Risotto's lover, Daniele Di Giacomo, was 8 years old. He was driving home with his father. His father, Giuseppe Di Giacomo, was a powerful mafia boss. They were returning from the barber's shop when a man wearing a helmet pulled up alongside them. He fired at their windscreen. Unharmed, Di Giacomo pulled his son from the car. Both father and son fled on foot to save their lives. But it was of little use. The killer followed them. He fired twice and killed Di Giacomo. 8-year-old Daniele saw his father being shot. He ran alone for his life. But why am I telling you all of this? And how does it affect Daniele and Josie? As I told you, it's nothing less than a Shakespearean tragedy. You might have already guessed this. The Giacomo's killer was related to Risotto. He was Giacomo Risotto's own uncle, Tony Lipari. And that is why the Risotto clan was against Daniele and Jesse's relationship. 9 years on, they dreaded Daniele Di Giacomo finding out about his father's murder. They faced a horrible dilemma. You see, they couldn't ask Jessie to end the relationship abruptly. It would arouse suspicion. If they told Jessie about the history, she would tell Daniele about all of it. And this would invite trouble for the entire family. But at the same time, if they did not do anything about this, they would have their victim's son in their own house. So what was the way out? Before they could find a solution, the Italian military police took advantage of the situation. Through the wiretap, they heard a clan member saying this: "Don't you understand that Tony killed him?" And this was enough to back up shreds of evidence. They arrested Tony Lipari on suspicion of murder. Investigators suspect Lipari shot Giuseppe Di Giacomo on Tommaso Lopresti's orders. He was a fellow mobster who took over Di Giacomo's role after his death. What will happen to the mafia, Romeo and Juliet, now? Well, it remains unclear. Were they really in love, or did Daniele Di Giacomo have a motive? Was he trying to get close to the family only to find out the truth about his father's murder? He did date another young female of the Risotto family. Could that be a coincidence, or was this a calculated move? Whatever the truth is, the love tragedy helped solve a murder mystery. And if there is a winner in this story, it is surely the Italian military police. Are you conscious about your health? Do you see sugar-free products as a safe bet? Do you rely on them? Well, at least this is what food brands would want you to believe, that they are safe bets. While they promise no sugar in their products, there is a silent killer working to satisfy your palate. Aerated drinks, ice creams, yogurts, even the most ordinary chewing gum, they are full of artificial sweeteners which can cause strokes, blood clots, and, believe it or not, can also result in death. But what we see as a replacement for sugar has a secret ingredient. It is called erythritol. The artificial compound contains 70% sweetness of sugar and reportedly contains 0 calories. It also does not spike the blood sugar levels and leaves no lingering aftertaste. Erythritol is a sweetheart of the food industry. It is also popular for a few other things, that is to cause blood platelet clotting, increase the risk of osmotic diarrhea, and double the chances of heart disease. Although the popular additive is capable of damage, it may seem ironic that the human body produces its own erythritol. It is produced in very low amounts and thus cannot cause any harm as such. Experts say that the blood level of erythritol should remain below 25%, and anything above that will result in a 2-fold higher risk of cardiovascular diseases. Scientists say having only 30 grams of erythritol in an ordinary soft drink can make blood levels spike 1,000-fold, and the levels can remain elevated to heighten clotting risks for up to 3 days since consumption. These statistics might encourage you to quit sugar-free products, but it is a bit more difficult than you think. Studies show that artificial sweeteners taste sweeter than natural sugar and encourage our bodies to want more, making us addicted to erythritol. So how can one take a step to be free of sugar-free foods? Well, you could have a fruit. The natural sugar in fresh fruit is enough to satisfy a sweet tooth. Studies show that a fruit diet is one of the best ways to lose weight. Fruits are bundled with antioxidants, fiber, fluid, which are the key nutrients for our body and support overall health. The second option is to use sweet spices. These are seasonings like ginger, cinnamon, cardamom, which can replace sugar in various dishes. But if you are brave enough, go cold turkey. Give up artificial sweeteners once and for all. Diet drinks and flavored yogurts will always be around, but you should remember to read the ingredients carefully. Always remember, do not let artificial sweeteners turn your life sour. Let's now tell you what else made news around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
Protests erupted outside schools in Tehran and Ardabil. People were sloganeering against their supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, after over 100 students were hospitalized for alleged poisoning at multiple girls' schools in at least 3 cities. The Interior Minister debunked reports of security forces detaining 3 people for suspected poisonings. Romanian Prime Minister appoints an artificial intelligence assistant named WION as his new honorary advisor, hails it as the first of its kind. 2 dead in Russian missile strike on Zaporizhzhia apartment block. Ukraine's emergency services rescue 20 people from the 5-story residential building. Amid warnings of an impending food crisis, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ordered improvement in infrastructure and expansion of farmland to ramp up food production. Kim gave instructions to revamp irrigation systems, build modern farming machines, and create more arable land, as he wrapped up the 7th enlarged plenary meeting of the ruling Workers' Party's powerful Central Committee. North Korea's economy has been battered by floods and typhoons, sanctions over its nuclear and missile programs, and a sharp decline in trade with China amid border closures and COVID-19 lockdowns. An Australian indigenous group stepped up its campaign against industrial development at the Burrup Peninsula in Western Australia, alleging the project's plan in the region would damage millions of ancient rock art. Australian Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek appointed an investigator to assess the impact of industrial development, in response to an application from 2 Indigenous women representing the group called Save Our Songlines.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. Thanks very much for watching, leaving you with Gravitas images.
And these are our clever engineers. This is the tube. And here we are. This is the corridor.